Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of things that we need to do before we bring on our guest. Before we honor Mike Grebe, I want to thank some people who worked very hard to make this event a success. Our Vice President of Development, Jim Pugh, Director of External Relations, Eric Searing, our Development Associate, Leslie Lures, and our Vice President of Administration, Stacy Stick, all worked very hard to make tonight happen. But I am sure they would all agree that the bulk of the credit goes to our development consultant, Mary Stitt. She did a fantastic job of running this event, and here's the thing, it's her birthday. Now, I'm not going to embarrass her, and mostly I'm not going to embarrass myself by singing happy birthday, but Mary, thank you very much, and very happy birthday to you. You earned a good one. I am often referred to as the founder of Will, and I guess I am, except for two things. First, I didn't really think of the idea. Second, I really didn't have the money. But save for those two small things, it was all me. Tonight, we want to honor the man who first broached the idea and who, as president of the Lyndon Harry Bradley Foundation, was instrumental in getting the startup funding that any organization needs. Now, I've told this story before. Mike Grebe often introduces me as his former law partner at Foley and Lardner. I typically point out that while technically accurate, this is perhaps not sufficiently fulsome. I was a junior partner. He ran the firm. I was afraid of him. But, you know, that's not quite true either. Because there are a few people I know who represent Midwestern decency and fairness more than Mike Grebe, and truth be known, we young lawyers at Foley and Lardner knew that many, many years ago. Mike is the all-American guy, high school quarterback, West Point graduate, magna cum laude graduate of Michigan Law School, Army veteran. Incidentally, he is a magna cum laude graduate in the Michigan Law School, but he told me that he prefers the Wisconsin football team to Michigan. After Army, but before Michigan. He earned 2 Bronze Stars and a combat infantryman's badge in Vietnam. He went on to lead the largest law firm in the state, navigate state and national Republican politics, and then served as CEO of the Bradley Foundation. I even understand that one year at the Republican National Convention, I think he said it was in San Diego, he survived an hour in the green room with Ted Nugent. Now, the man has done it all. He's been advisors to governors and presidents and a central figure and leader in the conservative movement in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, and in America. And I want to make one thing clear. During that period of time, that movement has experienced a renaissance. People who tell you that conservatives never fight and never win do not remember America in 1979. I do, and Mike certainly does, and it is a very different place, and Mike Grebe is one of the reasons for that. Part of Mike's work, however small, was in creating Will. I remember over breakfast at the University Club, actually it might have been several breakfasts, Mike explained to me that what we really needed was a freedom-based litigation center in Milwaukee, and what did I think of that? I said it was a great idea, but it took me a while to understand that he was saying I was actually supposed to do something about it. But Mike waited patiently, and here we are. So please join me in saluting Mike Grebe for his lifetime of achievements.
Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you, Rick. I had an uncle, Charlie Warfield. He lived in the small town of Canton, Illinois, where he was the head janitor at the local International Harvester plant. Charlie was the least well-educated person in our extended family, at least in terms of formal education. But he read a great deal, and he turned himself into a self-appointed, self-educated, small-town philosopher. The man had an aphorism for everything. One time, somebody asked Charlie if he had lived in Canton his entire life. He said, "Not yet." Now, where in the world am I going with that? I don't want to appear ungrateful, but I must tell you I have a similar reaction to receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. Not yet. I am truly grateful for this recognition. Thank you, Rick, for the kind words, even though they bordered on hyperbole. Rick understates his role in the founding of WIL. He truly was the founder, and he provides this organization with great leadership. Mostly, I'm grateful because of the admiration and respect I have for this institution. WIL is a gem. It is a vitally important part of the conservative network in Wisconsin and is increasingly doing work that is national in scope. It's just a wonderful organization. So I'm grateful, and I thank everyone associated with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Finally, and that's the word Rick has been waiting for, I want to thank my friends who are here tonight. I know that you're not here you're only here in part because of me. You're here to support WIL, and the organization certainly deserves your support. You're here because you want to hear what Paul Gigot has to say, and he's going to do that as soon as I shut up. But to the extent that you're here in part because of me, I just want you to know I'm very grateful to all of you for being here. Thank you.
I accept Mike's friendly amendment about the Lifetime Achievement Award, and in fact, I second it. He's on our board of directors, and we're not finished with you yet. Tonight's theme is courage, and it's appropriate that our guest tonight is from the Wall Street Journal, because it had the courage to break the story of the infamous John Doe investigation of state conservatives after the recall election. Now, the reason that this was hard is that Wisconsin's John Doe law had a curious, and by my lights, and also by the lights of Judge Frank Easterbrook, clearly unconstitutional provision that allowed prosecutors to gag whoever they called before a court proceeding that was itself closed to the public. So before the Wall Street Journal could break the story, someone had to have the courage to stand up to the prosecutors and tell the Wall Street Journal what had happened. And while we as lawyers generally tell our clients to follow court orders, almost always a good idea, an order that violates the Constitution is no order at all. And we all know that that person was Eric O'Keefe. He didn't grandstand. He didn't engage in self-promotion. He simply told one news outlet, the Wall Street Journal, what was happening. And that's how we found out, And I'm going to let our speaker tell that story and explain what the Journal did. Paul Gigot is the editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his column Potomac Watch and currently hosts a podcast of the same name. I can personally attest that this podcast has the most important quality that any podcast can have. It is roughly the length of a dog walk. Cooper and Riley really love your podcast. And so, Paul also hosts the weekly cable show Journal Editorial Report on the Fox News Channel. Although this biographical detail is very important, perhaps it tells us less than the fact that Paul grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and remains, as we all must, a fan of the Green Bay Packers. Now, he's not staying for Sunday's game. He needs to get back to D.C. for the TV show to educate all of us, demonstrating that he, too, is willing to sacrifice for the civic health of his country. That's courage. Please give a big Milwaukee welcome to Paul Gigot.
Thank you very much, Rick. I have to say, I would be staying in Green Bay for the Packer game. It's a gold weekend, though, gold ticket weekend, so we don't have tickets. You Milwaukee season ticket holders have them. Otherwise, I would be staying. It's really great to be back here in Wisconsin. I do have, as Rick said, deep roots here. In fact, one of my oldest friends from grade school is here, Joe Rice. We used to play on the right around the corner, lived around the corner from me. So it's great to have so many people here that I know. I want to congratulate Mike Greeby, whose impact on the American political system, on the world of ideas, is truly has been enormous through the Bradley Foundation and his other good works. So you're honoring the right person. Congratulations, Mike. Thanks as well to the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty for inviting me here, giving me the chance to speak. You know, the world of free markets and free people is somewhat beleaguered these days. Certainly in the newspaper world, we feel a little bit isolated. So it's just so very important that we have institutions like yours that fights for school choice, fights for free speech on campus, fights for the ability to start a business and create jobs. It's crucial. So thanks for everything you do for Will and everything Will does. Now, I guess I should be especially grateful for you to invite a journalist, knowing what some of you must think about people in my line of work. Now, I have been written about myself by other journalists, so believe me, I know how you feel. I'm reminded of the story about Lord Beaverbrook, who was a press baron of about a century ago, who was once asked if his reporters had to be intelligent. He thought for a second and replied, "No, all I require is shorthand, typing, and a certain low rat-like cunning." Is Dan Bice here? I was told he would be. So Dan, you and I have that in common. I just want you to know. Some of you probably think journalists can be a little too arrogant as well, and certainly I think that's probably true. And I recall a time at a dinner like this one in Washington when a young man came up to me, approached me at the reception, introduced himself, and said, "Wow, I'm so thrilled to meet you. I read your stuff, I watch you on TV, and wow, it's just great to meet you in person." So of course I was feeling a little puffed up, good about myself. And we chatted for a minute or two before he said, well, I've got to go, but this has been really great. Now I can tell all of my friends I finally met Chris Matthews. That's a true story, and it is so humiliating in so many ways that I can't even begin to tell you. Though I think you probably can understand. As Rick said, I do want to talk about the press tonight, and specifically about how we at the Wall Street Journal became involved in reporting on the John Doe, the investigation from 2013 to 15. I've never told the full story of how we got involved and how that evolved. And I think, and I'm grateful for you're giving me the chance to do this, because I think it has some lessons about journalism and the rule of law, and what we think of should be the rule of law in a free society. So bear with me. I'm going to kind of relate that story from my point of view. It ultimately had a happy ending, but it could have turned out much worse if not for some very brave people. So very early on an October morning 6 years ago, Deborah Jordahl was still in bed when she heard noises outside her home and lights in the yard. The doorbell rang, she answered, and an armed Dane County deputy sheriff, presented her with a search warrant. Jordahl asked to be able to wake her children herself so they wouldn't be frightened. Permission denied. She asked to call her lawyer. Permission denied. The sheriff gathered the family in the living room, read the warrant that included a gag order, barring her from talking to anyone about the search, the warrant, or the case. The police searched through the house, going through every closet and drawer. They took away her phone, her husband's phone, their computers, their hard drives, iPods, her files, you name it, they took it. So who is this nefarious Deborah Jordahl? An Al-Qaeda sympathizer? A member of the Gambino crime family? No, she was a fundraiser for political causes she believed in. But in Wisconsin in 2013, political fundraising began to be suspected and treated like a criminal activity. The account that I just read to you is from my colleague Kim Strauss's book, very good book, The Intimidation Game, and I recommend it to you. And that early morning raid is how Deb Jordahl and others found out they were the targets of the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office, specifically a special counsel named Francis Schmitz, who'd been appointed, of course, by DA John Chisholm. 29 related subpoenas went out to conservative organizations across Wisconsin. Not everyone received a home visit at 6 a.m., but every recipient was ordered to turn over reams of files and documents and tell no one about it. And as the targets learned later, prosecutors had already been spending weeks listening in on their communications, reading their emails, monitoring their communications. Think about that. Prosecutors were turning the lives of people upside down based on allegations that the prosecutors wouldn't fully explain. But the targets weren't supposed to be able to even talk to their lawyers, much less each other. Now, I've often thought that the metaphor Kafkaesque is overdone by some of us in the media, but this gets there, pretty close. Now, the first I heard about this was some days later when I got a call from Colin Levy, who was one of my editorial writers. Colin was then based in Chicago, and she had heard from a source that there was perhaps a case of prosecutorial abuse going on in Wisconsin, and should she pursue it? I said, yeah, go ahead, but I have to admit, when I got that first call, I was a little skeptical. You get a lot of these stories in my business, and they often don't turn out to be as dramatic as advertised. Also, we're a national paper, and it's a state story, so you have to make sure it's got some kind of larger importance beyond just a local story. But then Dan Bice of the Journal-Sentinel broke the news of the probe, citing sources that he didn't name, multiple sources, he said, alleging, quote, possible campaign violations during the recent recall elections, unquote. Of course, Democrats immediately jumped on the story to suggest that many of Governor Scott Walker's allies were, in fact, corrupt. So here, I could see, was a classic case of an imbalance of power. The story of a secret probe somehow leaks to the press, complete with innuendo about possible crimes. But the targets of the probe were barred from defending themselves in public. Colin kept digging and soon called me to say that one of the subpoena targets was willing to speak on the record by name despite the gag order. As Rick said, his name was Eric O'Keefe, who ran the Wisconsin Club for Growth. I had never met Eric, and to this day, I've only spoken to him once on the phone, and then tonight, for the first time, met him in person. But Colin was the person, my reporter, dealing with Eric, and I asked Colin to make sure that Eric understood that if he did put his name on the record and disclose the subpoena's contents, he could be cited for contempt of court and fined and perhaps end up in jail. And I asked Colin if she were willing to take the risk of getting a subpoena or worse as well, because sometimes journalists are subpoenaed and held in contempt, as we all learned in the case of Judy Miller of the New York Times and the Valerie Plame leak case. Both Colin and Eric said, yep, they'd take that risk. And so on November 16th of 2013, we ran an editorial headlined Wisconsin Political Speech Raid. Unlike the Journal-Sentinel, we had the subpoenas and someone on the record. We reported the raids. We named the prosecutors who declined to talk to Colin. We put in a call. This broke the story wide open, and other media outlets were suddenly obliged to pursue the details. So finally, the other side of the story had a public hearing. But Eric O'Keefe didn't stop there. He asked his attorneys to fight the subpoenas in court, and in January 2014, Judge Gregory Peterson, the John Doe judge, quashed the subpoena. Most important, from a legal point of view, he rejected the, quote, illegal coordination theory of the prosecutors that had been used to justify all that snooping and those raids from the start. Schmitz and Chisholm, the prosecutors, had built an elaborate theory that these independent conservative donors had illegally coordinated with Scott Walker's campaign for governor. Yet despite all of the snooping, all of the subpoenas, they found no evidence that these independent groups had expressly called for Walker's election. Under the law, independent groups can advocate all they want for issues, lower taxes, conservative judges, you name it. This is called issue advocacy, and it's legal. Advocating for a specific candidate is called express advocacy, which can be illegal if there is coordination between a candidate's campaign and the outside groups. Illegal coordination does not mean, by the way, urging donors to give to the Club for Growth. Barack Obama did that for groups on the left as he was running for office. In other words, the Milwaukee prosecutors had concocted a theory of coordination that was illegal itself, as Judge Peterson found. Yet the prosecutors wouldn't give up, and Schmidt sought a contempt citation against O'Keefe. Judge Peterson, to his great credit, did not go along. So Eric was spared jail. But why does all this matter? First, as a matter, I think, of simple justice. Prosecutors have enormous power, and when they abuse it, we have a system of checks and balances. One of those checks is the courts, and in this case, the courts actually did their job. They don't always do that, but in this case, they did. But another check should be the media. And in Wisconsin, the prosecutors had the press in their pocket. I have seen this many times in my career, and it's one of the reasons I got involved in this case. We paid attention to this because I'd seen this happen so often. Saw it happen in New York with Elliot Spitzer, taking on people, forcing them into charging people, forcing them into settlements through leaks, even if he never goes to trial. So with Jim Comey pursuing a single innocent man for years in the anthrax probe after 9/11. And I saw it through Patrick Fitzgerald's prosecution of Scooter Libby, even though he never leaked the name of Valerie Plame. Prosecutors, this is something you have to understand, the way journalists work, and the way this relationship between prosecutors and the press works. Prosecutors can find it relatively easy to manipulate the press because they control the information of the prosecution. No reporter, I can tell you this firsthand, no reporter likes to wake up in the morning, see a competitor have a story, and have their editor look at him and say, "Why didn't you have that story?" It gets to be pretty embarrassing. And a reporter who criticizes a prosecutor is going to be cut off. You see it time and again. The danger of abuse is even greater when nearly all the press agree with one another. They all buy into the same storyline, like a herd of independent minds. And when it comes to campaign finance, I can tell you the media in this country, they all run like wildebeest on the Masai Mara plain. All are running in the same direction. They all bought the narrative that Scott Walker was elected and then won the recall only because he had a lot of dark money. It was dark money, especially from the Koch brothers. Now, I'll define dark money for you. Dark money is another name for legal campaign contributions that don't have to be reported under the law. The money can come from George Soros on the left. It can come from the Kochs on the right. But the press, echoing prosecutors, wanted to believe the prosecution invention about illegal coordination. Yet the real corruption in this case was not dark money, it was dark power. By this I mean the awesome prosecutorial power of the state, employing warrants, employing a gag order to smother the free speech of political opponents. As we later learned, thanks to emails that came out in related litigation, the prosecutors were also working hand in glove with the Wisconsin Government Accountability Board. Francis Schmitz, the special counsel, had been an investigator for the GAB, which was supposed to be a good government operation enforcing ethics in politics. But as so often happens with these groups, GAB had been captured by partisans and zealots who wanted to enforce their particular view of campaign finance law. And in the process, they were more than willing to trample the First Amendment rights of their political opponents. Just to give you a little flavor here, as the GAB's Shane Falk put it in a 2013 email to Mr. Schmitz, the recall election, quote, was a bastardization of politics, and our state is being run by corporations and billionaires. That isn't democracy, to say the least, but due to how they do this dark money, the populace never gets to know. The cynic in me says the sheeple will still follow the propaganda even if he knew. Love that line, the sheeple. The voters as sheep who need to be instructed by the shepherds at the GAB and the Milwaukee DA's office. Especially disappointing in all this was the role of the press. Again, I have nothing against the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I'm an online subscriber. I really enjoy their Green Bay Packer coverage. And I was a member of the Pulitzer Prize Board for 9 years, and I think I voted for Milwaukee Journal entries at least 2 or 3 times. But you'd think the press of all institutions would zealously guard the right to free speech. We have a stake in it. Instead, the Journal-Sentinel, the New York Times, the New Yorker, just about every publication in the progressive world